he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open at the base.
Welcome everyone, it's Mario Kart 100. We're back with the Mario Kart Marathon. Let's continue this moving train by reviewing the next game in the franchise. Let's take a look at the fan favourite, Mario Kart 64, for the Nintendo 64.
So, Super Mario Kart was pretty successful, so an inevitable sequel was always going to be on the way. The next game of the franchise was brought forward to the next big Nintendo console that quite a few were excited for. Yeah, like that kid. Releasing in December 14th, 1996 in Japan, and 1997 in every other region, Mario Kart 64 was brought to the system. This game changed the franchise once again, with the racetracks now being designed with polygon-based, true 3D computer graphics, so they're not flat objects, but rather they're fully 3D now, adding another dimension to the track design. This shows well with heaps of ramps, but also hills and valleys in the design of many of the tracks in the game. The game also introduced 4-player multiplayer, so you and 3 friends can all play together at once, which is pretty damn cool. Playing 4-player multiplayer was a big selling point for the N64, so why not display that with Nintendo's mascot with a very popular sub-series. Of course, more games ended up having 4-player multiplayer, but this was one of the first, and what an outing to showcase this new addition. Production began in 1995 under the title Super Mario Kart R, with the R meaning rendered, since as we said, the game was rendered with all new 3D graphics with polygons. The game was originally developed alongside both Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, with the intention to be a launch game for the N64. But more resources were given to the other two, which makes sense due to how big those entries were for their respective franchises. And it did pay off, but it wasn't like Nintendo neglected this game. It's made pretty well. Mario series creator Shigeru Miyamoto acted as producer and often consulted with game director Hideki Kono, which makes sense due to both of them taking the task of the previous game, so it's not a bad idea. Some early footage of the game was showcased briefly at the Shoshinkai Software Exhibition in Japan on November 24th, 1995. Miyamoto stated that the game at the time was 95% complete, but Nintendo chose not to display a playable version due to the difficulty of demonstrating the multiplayer features, considering that the N64 wasn't out until June of the next year. The prototype featured both the feather item from Super Mario Kart and a Magic Koopa as one of the 8 playable characters, but both were scrapped. Mario Kart 64 has 8 playable characters once again, like Super Mario Kart, but there are some new additions to the list. The roster is Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, Toad, Yoshi, Bowser, and newcomers Wario and Donkey Kong, with Donkey Kong replacing the Magic Koopa from the old prototype. The characters are divided into 3 weight classes, which was the first time they did this in the series. These classes are lightweights, whose karts have the highest acceleration and top speed, in trade for low weight, so they can be knocked around easily. Heavyweights, whose karts have higher weight to knock around players and lose less speed while turning, but suffer from slightly lower top speed and acceleration. And middleweights, who have mediocre acceleration and the same top speed as the heavyweights, but have much better control of steering. This makes the game a little bit balanced, but also makes the choice of what character you use more important at the same time. My go-to for this game is always Luigi, but this roster is great. Sucks that we lose Koopa Troopa and DK Jr. in the transition to this entry, but this roster is basically the base roster you work from. Maybe a couple extra additions in future games, but these are like the original 12 Smash Bros. Roster members. They all have to be in every Mario Kart game until the end of time. Mic drop. The player's driving controls in this game were designed to be similar to operating a radio control car, and I will say, they definitely do. It very much feels like that, but it's not a bad thing. The kart's control is much better in this game than the last game. Pretty much all the slipperiness has been ironed out, and the game is much better for it. New mechanics like drifting and also slipstreaming are added to the game, and with drifting, that also adds mini-turbo as well, when wiggling the analog stick back and forth. Though it's not as obvious of a boost to the kart's speed as it is from Double Dash and onwards, but I guess it's a little speed considering your character yells out their signature success catchphrase after each successful power slide, so it must be a good thing. I will say I haven't played this game on an actual N64, only on the virtual console, but geez, the control, probably one of the best aspects of this game. It's so much fun to take control of the characters and karts in this game. I'm serious, such a massive improvement over Super Mario Kart. It's no contest, honestly. Even though the racetracks are now rendered in 3D polygons and such, that wasn't going to be it. Hideki Kono stated that, though rendering the characters as 3D models was not impossible, the display of 8 simultaneous 3D characters would have exceeded the processing power of the N64. So instead, the characters are composed of pre-rendered 2D sprites that show the characters from various angles to simulate a 3D appearance, similar to Super Mario Kart, Killer Instinct, and Cruisin' USA. Rare, developer of the Donkey Kong Country games, also provided Donkey Kong's character model. It sucks that everything like tracks, models, and items couldn't be fully rendered in 3D, but if the console couldn't handle it, it's good that the development team found workarounds with 2D sprites. It looks a little jarring these days, but it's not too bad. The game with these looks give off a retro vibe, and I like that, despite probably a bunch of reviewers giving negative thoughts on this aspect. Halfway into the game's production, the developers suffered a hard disk crash, causing the original character models to become lost. They were forced to remake about 80% of the character models and updated the character select screen to have them animated instead of stills, which was not in the original plans. So yeah, even with all the negatives, the fact that this game had things added despite the team losing a whole bunch of progress, that's dedication right there. Let's talk about the items once again, since we have some new additions and a couple of omissions too. We have a bunch of returning items like red and green shells, banana peels, the mushroom, Boo, the lightning bolt, and Starman, but no returning cape feather, poison mushroom, and Yoshi egg to name a few. With new additions in this game, we triple variations of items as well, like triple red shells, triple green shells, triple mushrooms, as well as bunches of banana peels, but also all new items like the golden mushroom, giving unlimited speed boost for a set period of time, a fake item box to lay as a trap like banana peels, and the dreaded spiny shell, not in its current form, acting like a red shell that could hit more players on the way to getting to first place before knocking them across the course. It's like what the charged up electric ball item from Crash Team Racing would become, seeing as that game released after this one, to make the comparison. I can't tell you how many times the spiny shell in this game has hit me when I wasn't in first place. I've lost count. And from Double Dash until Mario Kart Wii, the blue shell got changed to only hitting the player in first, and gaining wings in the design as well. It's funny though, because from Mario Kart 7 to the most recent mainline game in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, plus Mario Kart Tour, it kept the wings, but got changed back to its Mario Kart 64 properties by hitting other players on the course on the way to blow up the player in first. Talk about vengeful. The game also added in a new feature, and that was the dreaded technique of Rubber Band AI, which prevents all the racers from easily separating on the track. And that, plus the previously mentioned addition of the Spiny Shell item, these changes were made to keep each race competitive and balanced. It's kind of a bit bull though, because again, with items you can still dominate in races. I understand a balance argument, sure, but if that's the case, why have all these steps in place? Usually if multiple people playing are good enough, then let them fight it out for top spot. They're good enough at the game, so why hamper their skills and enjoyment of the game, especially in single player when a system like this can make races feel like a quarter-eating arcade game where it can all rely on luck to even finish well. It's just dumb, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the controls more in depth, just to take our minds off of that AI. Like I mentioned, the controls were made for karts to feel like RC cars, and they definitely nailed that feeling with this. This is a stark contrast to Super Mario Kart, where even if you don't know how to play this game, you can still pick it up and play well. So these are the controls on the Virtual Console version of the game on the Nintendo Wii. Using the D-pad moves the cursor on the menu, but not the kart in races, though you can also use the left analog stick to do that as well. The left analog stick also turns the kart left and right on the track. The A button makes the kart accelerate, but is also the confirmation button in menus. The B button is the kart's brake, but also is the decline button in menus as well. The right analog stick is all the N64C buttons with all sorts of different controls. Pressing up changes the view from close to further away. Pressing down is an option to use items. Pressing right changes the map to a different map or to a speedometer, and pressing left does absolutely nothing. The L button uses items while holding the button holds the item if it's something like a shell or banana peel, and the X and Y buttons also use items too. The start button pauses during races and not much else. The R button makes the kart drift while holding the button down, making it power slide. Lastly, both the ZL and ZR buttons change the volume of the background music. There's the controls, pretty consistent and pretty comfortable honestly. Let's also talk about the Racetrack Selection too, since this is one of the most recognizable rosters of all the Mario Kart games. All but one racetrack in this game has returned as a retro course in future games, the exception being Wario Stadium. That's how good this Racetrack Selection is. From all the raceway tracks like Royal Raceway and Luigi Raceway, to Moo Moo Farm, to Sherbet Land, to Yoshi Valley, and many more, this Racetrack Selection is basically perfect. My least favourites are DK's Jungle Parkway and Koopa Troopa Beach, but even then, I'd rate those two tracks at least a 7 or 8 out of 10. That's how good the selection is, and I have absolutely no problems with that. The soundtrack for Mario Kart 64 was composed by Kenta Nagata, which was his first work on a Nintendo game, and geez, what a first impression. All the music tracks for this game are fantastic. I literally do not have a track I do not like in this soundtrack, and that speaks volumes on how well it was done. Some of my favourites are Calamari Desert, Banshee Boardwalk, and Choco Mountain to name a few, but every single music track in this game is fabulous. Even the results music is great. Phenomenal. As for the modes in this game, we have 4 of them. For single player, we have both Grand Prix and Time Trial like the last game, with the only change to Grand Prix being the unlockable mirror mode in difficulty levels. You can still rank out, so baby steps I guess. Time Trial is the same as before, bar the addition of triple mushrooms for you to use during the race at any time, which becomes a standard for the mode in future games. As for multiplayer, there's Versus mode and also Battle mode. Battle mode is pretty much unchanged apart from looking better and new arenas, with the only addition being to 3 and 4 player battles where you can become a mini-bomb cart after being eliminated, which can be used as an extra obstacle for the surviving players. Versus mode is where you and up to 3 players can compete on who is the best on any track in any order you want. Not subjected to full Grand Prix anymore, you can select any track in any order you want, which is great. Very basic choices again, but these work really well, so I don't have a problem with it at all.
Overall, Mario Kart 64 is still such a fun game to play, and by many is considered to be one of the best games in the franchise. It sold 9.87 million copies worldwide, making it the second best-selling game on the N64 ever. And it definitely deserves those accolades. It's still so much fun. This is one of my absolute favourites, and I still play it to this day. I played it back on the Virtual Console, but I even played it via an emulator back when I was at school, so you can definitely tell I really enjoyed this entry. I'd give this game a 9 out of 10 if I had to give it a score. There's nothing really wrong with it, maybe just the graphics, but that really comes with age with all N64 games. So, with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. This has been Mario Kart 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care. Next time in the Mario Kart Marathon, we move on to games I actually physically own with Mario Kart Super Circuit for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance.
Select your player. Let's go.